What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with Season 5 of Modern Warfare, there have been a fair number of weapon balancing changes that have directly affected Warzone, and also we've got a couple new guns into the mix. And lately, I've had a lot of people really questioning what is the best gun now, or what are the best guns to be using in Warzone after these adjustments. And it seems like a lot of people still haven't quite settled on which gun is their top gun now. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing what I personally consider to be the top 5 primary guns to use in Warzone at this point in Season 5. Now, of course, keep in mind, some of this will be subjective. However, at the same time, I do base a lot of my decisions on the stats of the game because that's my job, is to keep up with all the stats of all the guns. And also, just keep in mind, I'm only talking about primary weapons. So I'm talking about like the main guns you'd run around with that you feel comfortable in a wide variety of situations with. I'm not talking about sniper rifles in this. I'm not talking about SMGs in this. It's mainly going to be assault rifles and LMGs because these are those most versatile weapons that you tend to find in Warzone. So in many cases, the guns I'm going to be talking about today, I will be pairing with an SMG, for instance, or with a sniper rifle. We're just not going to be focusing on those today. Also, as I'm going through this list, I'm going to throw up the class setup that I was using in these particular gameplays, and these are often the sorts of class setups I will be using in regular Battle Royale as well. I just use Plunder because it's great for showing off a gun's ability really quickly because you get a lot of kills in a shorter period of time. So let's kick it off with number 5 on my list and get this one out of the way. This is the Kilo 141. So with the Kilo, the big upsides that really play well into Warzone, first up, it is very accurate. So you can use this at longer ranges quite comfortably, and it's not completely useless up close. It doesn't have the greatest time to kill or anything up close, especially compared to like SMGs, so that's why I would typically pair this with an SMG. But it is a pretty versatile gun. We do have the ability to have that 60-round magazine as well, which we do with many of the assault rifles, but that really helps in Warzone, especially if you're in like trios or quads and you're dealing with multiple enemies. And when it comes to this, I think it's just pretty straightforward. The Kilo is one of those good all-around versatile guns that doesn't necessarily dominate in any situations. That is one of the downsides of the Kilo. It's not dominant in time to kill in any particular situation. It's just really good and consistent all around. Now, admittedly, I tend to stay away from the Kilo 141, and this is why I have it as number 5 on my personal list. Just because even though I recognize the versatility and the potential power of the Kilo, I just don't like the feel of it too much compared to many of the other guns I'm going to be talking about today. But at the same time, I definitely feel it deserves a spot on this list because for some people, this is going to be their new favorite gun for Warzone. But moving on to number 4 on my list, this is the Grau 5.56. This gun, even though it has received some nerfs and it's no longer that gun that every single person seems to be using, it's still a very solid choice. Just like with the Kilo, it's very accurate, very easy to control. That's one of the big highlights of this. It doesn't really excel when it comes to time to kill. It's more so about that accuracy, so you're not missing any shots, and therefore, practically, you're going to be killing faster than a gun that has a higher DPS value, but isn't as accurate, and therefore you'd be missing shots with it. Additionally, one of the big upsides with the Grau that many other guns don't have is the incredible iron sight on the Archangel barrel. This means that even if you're trying to challenge people at relatively long ranges, you don't really need an optic on the Grau, unlike many of the other guns where I just don't feel comfortable challenging people beyond even like 50 meters unless I have some form of an optic on it. So yeah, even though the Grau is no longer what I'd consider to be that absolute top dog and nothing else really competes, it's definitely still a top 5 weapon in Warzone, in my opinion. Now, moving on to number 3 on my list, this is the Bruen. It's the same story as the Grau here, where the Bruen, for most of Season 4, that was the top dog. That was the dominant gun that all the streamers and anybody playing in tournaments, they had a tendency to lean towards the Bruen because it had a great time to kill potential, great range values, it's super accurate, and even though it's an LMG, you can really kit it out nicely to handle more like an assault rifle, so it doesn't feel slow and clunky like all of the other LMGs out there. And it really closed that gap between an assault rifle and LMG. The big upside to using this over something like the Grau or the Kilo is your time to kill potential is much better. Assuming you're hitting your shots, you're definitely going to be winning those fights against Kilos and Graus. And today, that's no exception. Even after the Bruen nerf from earlier this week, where they significantly reduced its maximum damage range, it's still a really good choice in Warzone. You're still going to be melting people up close. You're still going to be very competitive at longer ranges because it's still a very accurate gun that still deals solid damage even at its longest ranges. And this is why I would say it hasn't been knocked out of the top 5 by any means, and while you might notice that it's not quite as amazing as it was pre-patch, it's still pretty darn good. Moving on, it's time to get into number 2 on my list for Season 5, and this is actually the AMAX. This is a gun that I actually think is going to start rising to the top for many of the streamers. And as many of you know, the streamers tend to sort of guide the meta. As soon as the top streamers start using a particular gun and they stick to it, many of their followers will basically copy and paste that setup, and then it just sort of takes over as the meta. And this might be the time for the CR56. Now, the reason the CR56 AMAX made the list here is, first up, it has an excellent DPS value, or damage per second value. It puts people down very quickly up close, and it's very usable at longer ranges as well. Now, it's not going to be as pinpoint accurate as a Kilo or a Grau or anything like that, but it is very manageable. It's really not that bad to control it with the right attachment combination. And personally, I've been finding a lot of success with this gun, and I do see it potentially rising up to one of the top meta guns for Season 5. Now, the downsides to having the CR56 over some of the other ARs: first up, like I said, it's not as accurate as some of them, even though it is still very accurate and very controllable. But more importantly, we only have access to a 45-round magazine. We can't get up to a 60-round mag, unlike many of the other assault rifles. And also, it has a bit of a slower rate of fire compared to many of the 5.56 assault rifles. And what this means is this gun isn't going to be extremely forgiving if you're missing shots. Now, for the top players out there that have pinpoint accurate aim, that's not going to be much of a problem, but for many of the lesser skilled players out there, it might be a bit more difficult for them to pick up the CR56 over something like one of the other guns on this list. But aside from those factors, the AMAX is way up there on my list, and I think it might become one of the top guns for this season. Now, before we get into number 1, I did want to include an honorable mention here that I don't see rising to the top of the meta this season, but I personally really enjoy, and I will actually use over some of the guns that I have on this list. This is the M13. The M13 is just one of those guns. It's super accurate, super consistent, great range values on it, and the handling is also amazing. Unfortunately, the reason that it's not really a top tier meta gun that you're going to be seeing everybody using is its damage potential is just too low. Even up close against an enemy with full health and full armor, if you're just hitting body shots, it's going to take you 11 shots to kill. Now, those 11 shots are coming out way faster than all of the other guns that I have on my list here, and therefore the time to kill isn't too much slower than some of these other guns. Like, it is roughly in the same region as the Grau or the Kilo. But for many people, it just feels like a hit marker machine, because it kind of is. It takes you 11 hits to kill somebody up close. So that's why you're probably not going to see this rise to the top of the meta anytime soon. I just really like it, and I wanted to throw it in here because I enjoy using it. But finally, this allows me to move into number 1 on my list. And this is a gun where I feel like people just forgot it existed or something. This is the M4A1. What happened to this gun? I feel like I almost never see this anymore in Warzone. And that's just crazy to me. The M4A1 is an incredible gun. It's extremely accurate. It's got a great rate of fire, so it's more forgiving than the Kilo or the Grau. It's got a better time to kill potential than the Kilo or the Grau. Its range values are awesome when you're using the longer barrels on it. Its handling is also top tier for an assault rifle. Why is nobody using this? I don't know what happened here. It's like people just forgot that this gun existed for some weird reason. And I think it's just because, I think it was back in Season 3, the Grau really started to take over and people just started moving away from the M4 in favor of the Grau. And since the Grau got nerfed, nobody decided to look back at the M4 and think, maybe this is a good option to use now. So yeah, I really don't know what's going on here. I almost never see M4s anymore, and that kind of blows my mind because this is absolutely a top tier weapon in Warzone, and quite possibly the best, most versatile gun overall in the game. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for my list of what I consider to be the top 5 versatile primary weapons to use in Warzone. As for just a brief mention on my favorite secondary weapons to be using, I often like to run with either a sniper rifle or an SMG, depending on the primary gun that I'm using, depending on whether or not it's suited to long range or close range. But when it comes to sniper rifles, I gave the Rytec AMR an honest go since the Season 5 buff, where it's always going to be a one-shot kill to the head. And while it is significantly better than it was before, I have found myself going back to the trusty old AX50 that I enjoy. There's just something about the Rytec that doesn't really work too well for me. I think I have that in my head where I know the rate of fire is great and it's a semi-auto, so I focus less on hitting my first shot because subconsciously I've got my next shot ready to go, so it's okay if I miss my first shot. Whereas with an AX50 or an HDR, I've got to make sure I hit that first shot because it's a bolt action, so it's going to take me a little bit longer to get the second shot off. As for my close range secondary weapons, honestly, I'm still sticking to the FAL in most situations. Even after the nerfs, the FAL is still an incredible gun as long as you're accurate and hitting your upper torso and headshot multipliers. You still have the fastest time to kill potential out of any of the other regular guns in this game, as long as you're hitting those multipliers. So yeah, I'm definitely still going to be using the FAL, and then aside from that, if I'm going SMG, it's going to be the MP7 or MP5. Pretty basic choices, those really haven't changed with the Season 5 update, but I did want to mention what my secondary choices are. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what is your favorite gun to be using in Warzone currently? Or maybe top 3 or something like that. Just let me know which guns you find to be best in Season 5 specifically. If you enjoy the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.